My sister stepped forward first, her face twisting with bitterness. So now you come crawling back. The second money shows up you suddenly remember this place. You could not handle the work but now you think you deserve a cut. You are not even worth standing on this land. My brother let out a cold mocking laugh and piled on. You were always the useless one, could not take pressure, ran off like a coward, and now you show up thinking you can take what we built. You do not get a single dollar. I was born into a family of 5, the youngest, and from very early on, I understood something no one ever said out loud. I didn't belong the way the others did. My brother was always going somewhere. My sister was meant for better things. And I was the one who stayed, the one who carried what needed carrying. I don't remember the last time my parents asked if I was okay, but I remember exactly what it felt like to be overlooked in my own home. When I was 10, I was pulled out of school not because I wanted to leave, but because my parents said a girl didn't need much education, that I should stay and help with the farm. I asked why my brother and sister could keep going and I couldn't, and all I got back was, "You know enough." That was the day something in me went quiet. From then on, my life was the farm. Mornings started before sunrise and ended when everything was done, my hands rough from hauling feed, my clothes carrying the smell of animals and dirt so strongly that even my own family kept their distance. No one asked if I was tired, only if the work was finished, and somewhere in that silence I started paying attention. I noticed the chickens changed before they stopped laying, the cattle showed signs before they got weak, so I started trying things quietly. Sometimes it failed, eggs breaking because the shells were too thin, chickens lost to sickness I couldn't stop, and every time something went wrong, it was my fault. So I stopped explaining and just kept learning. I adjusted their feed, added calcium from crushed shells, kept their schedule consistent, tightened the coop, limited outside exposure, kept everything cleaner. Over time the chickens stabilized. Bigger eggs, stronger shells, steady production. With the cattle, I learned it wasn't about feeding more but feeding right. I changed the balance, watched their digestion, adjusted their grain, paid attention to what others ignored. The weak ones recovered, their coats turned glossy, their weight came back. No one asked what I did differently, they just said the farm was doing better. From 8 head of cattle we grew to more than 30. 5 years passed like that, not all at once but piece by piece, just like everything I lost along the way. Then came the day we sold everything. 34 head of cattle, 300 chickens, loaded before sunrise, trucks lined up, gates opening, everything I had raised walking out one by one. By the end of the day, it was over $50,000 more money than I had ever seen in my life, and for the first time I let myself think, maybe this time something would come back to me. It didn't. My father said the money was going to my brother to help him get started. My mother added that my sister's college wouldn't pay for itself. They said it like it was obvious, like I had never been part of the equation. I stood there, still carrying the weight of the work that made that money, and something in me shifted, quiet but final. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't stay silent. I stood in the kitchen and asked a simple question, one I should have asked a long time ago. What about me? The room went still. My father didn't answer right away, just set his glass down like the question didn't deserve much. What do you mean? He asked. I swallowed, but this time I didn't back down. I've worked here for 5 years. The cattle, the chickens, all of it. Do I have anything in this? That was the moment everything changed. My father looked at me, his expression turning cold. You're turning this into a transaction? He said. My mother cut in sharper. We raised you and now you're asking what you get. My chest tightened, but I kept going. I'm not asking for much. I just want to know if any of this is mine. No one answered that. The silence felt heavier than anything they could have said. Then my father stood up and stepped closer, his voice lower, final. If you're going to make this about money, then you don't understand this family. I met his eyes for the first time without looking away. It's not that I don't understand, it's that I finally do. That was enough. Then you can leave, he said, calm, like it had already been decided. If you don't accept how this family works, you don't have to stay. My mother didn't stop him. She just looked at me like I was already gone. Go out there and see how long you last. I waited just for a second, for something, anything to prove I mattered. But there was nothing. Behind them, my brother and sister stood there, silent, not one word, not one step forward. And in that moment I understood the last thing I needed to know. I had never been part of them. I turned and walked away without another word. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because I had already said everything. I packed a small bag, whatever I could carry, and by the time I stepped back into the living room, no one moved, no one asked where I was going, No one told me to stay. My hand touched the door, cold, and just before I opened it, my father's voice came from behind me, steady and certain. "If you walk out, don't come back." I paused for a second, then opened the door. The night outside was darker and colder than I expected. I stepped out with nothing but a bag in my hand. No money, no plan, nowhere to go. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't living for them anymore. And even though I didn't know what was waiting for me out there, I knew one thing for sure: I was never going back as the same person again. I held my first job for more than a few days at a small roadside diner off the highway where people came and went but never stayed long. I started with washing dishes, mopping floors, taking out trash, anything they asked as long as I could stay. The owner was a middle-aged woman who spoke little and watched me like she was deciding whether I was worth keeping. I worked non-stop without complaining because I knew if I lost this job I would be back to nothing. After about 2 weeks they let me stand closer to the counter, helping prepare food and sometimes handling cash during rush hours. It was the first time I touched something like trust since I left home. And that was exactly when everything started to break. One busy afternoon, money went missing from the register. Not a lot, but enough to change the atmosphere. The owner did not speak right away. She looked at each of us and then stopped at me. I knew what was coming. Someone who had been there longer said I had handled cash too. Before I could say anything, I was told to stand still, empty my pockets, turn around. They checked everything in front of everyone. They found nothing, but it did not change anything. The way they looked at me had already decided who I was: a thief, someone who could not be trusted. The owner said money does not just disappear, and I was told to leave that same night. No argument, no explanation. I stood there trying to swallow the humiliation, and before I walked out I saw what I had missed earlier. The same employee who pointed at me had a small stack of cash in his hand. Hidden but not enough. He thought no one noticed, but I did. I said nothing, not because I was afraid, but because I understood something clearly. In that place the truth did not matter. I walked out not just because I was fired, but because I knew I could not stay somewhere people were so ready to believe the worst about me. That night I sat on the side of the road, my hands still shaking. I did not cry, but for the first time I felt something worse than hunger. I had just lost the only thing I had started to get back: trust. After leaving that diner I did not stop for long. I kept looking for work and found a job at a small convenience store in a busy neighborhood. The work was not as physically hard as the farm, but it demanded speed and precision. I worked the counter, stocked shelves, made coffee, heated food, did everything to keep the store from slowing down. The owner was an older man who ran things the same way every day, everything based on habit, but the person who caught my attention was another employee, older than me, who had been there longer and always seemed irritated when I did things differently. I did not talk much, but I watched. I realized morning customers did not have time to wait. They came in, grabbed what they needed, paid and left. But the store kept running out of hot food during peak hours. I started preparing ahead, keeping just enough ready at the right time. After a few days I saw customers returning. They did not say anything, but they came back. Sales during my shifts improved. I kept working quietly, but it did not go unnoticed. One busy morning he intentionally left prep undone. The line grew, customers got impatient. I had to handle everything at once, serving and preparing from scratch. When things settled he came up to me and said, "Do not think you know better than everyone else." I did not respond, but I understood the problem was not that I was wrong, it was that I was different. A few days later things got worse. A customer came back complaining their order was missing items, and he pointed at me saying I handled the shift. I knew I was not at fault, but the owner did not check. He just looked at me with frustration. The argument escalated, the customer got louder, he kept blaming me, and I stood there trying to stay calm, until he slammed a tray onto the counter in front of everyone. That was the moment something shifted. I looked straight at him and said, "You know exactly who made the mistake." The room went quiet. He stepped closer and asked, "Who do you think you are?" The distance between us closed, and when the owner stepped in he did not try to find the truth. He chose the fastest way to restore order. I was told to leave, no questions, no investigation, just a decision to keep the store running. This time I was not shocked, I just saw things more clearly. Doing the right thing is not enough when you are not in the right position. I took off my apron, placed it on the counter and walked out without looking back, but this time I carried something new, understanding. Customers do not care who is right or wrong, they care about one thing: whether they are served quickly, correctly and reliably. And if a place cannot do that, they will not return. After leaving that store I started working as a delivery driver for an app. What seemed like a simple job turned into one of the most important lessons I would ever learn. One night during heavy rain I picked up an order going to a hospital. The distance was short but traffic was blocked and everything slowed down. I knew I was running late and every minute felt heavier. When I arrived I was almost 20 minutes behind. The man waiting at the entrance was soaked, his eyes tired from lack of sleep. He took the bag, opened it, then looked at me, not with anger but with something deeper. He told me his wife was upstairs. She had cancer and had not been able to eat all day. She had only asked for one thing, a warm meal. I stood there with rain dripping from my hair, unable to say anything. I had tried my best, but that did not change the fact that I was late. He did not yell, he just walked away carrying the food. The elevator doors closed and I stood there holding my phone as a low rating came through. For the first time I did not feel it was unfair. I understood the problem was not effort, it was the system behind it. From that day I changed how I worked. I chose orders closer to each other, calculated time more carefully, communicated when delays could happen, and focused on keeping the food stable until it reached the customer. I stopped seeing myself as just a driver. I was part of the experience, and I learned something I would never forget. Customers do not remember how hard you tried. They remember what they received and when they received it. After days of driving through heat and rain, I got used to being treated like someone who could be replaced at any moment. One time I delivered to a large office building and security stopped me at the entrance, telling me I could not go in through the front door. I stood outside holding hot food while people in suits walked past like I was invisible. Minutes later the customer called, not to apologize but to complain that I was late. I said I was already there. He came down, took the bag, glanced at me and said, "Do it faster next time, this is not hard," then walked away. I said nothing, but inside it was different from before. It was clearer. I understood that to them I was just one part of a system. And when that system failed, the first person they saw would always take the blame. I could not change how they saw me, but I could change how I understood everything. I began to see every job I had done as pieces of something larger. From the farm I learned how small adjustments create real results. From the diner I learned flow and structure. From the store I learned what actually drives sales. And from delivery I learned the most important factor, time. I started to see patterns: morning rush, lunch demand, evening convenience. And at every moment customers wanted the same thing: fast, consistent and reliable. I stopped working just to earn money. I started observing like someone building something. I watched how stores arranged products, how they prepared before peak hours, how they handled problems. I remembered what worked and what failed. There were days I was looked down on, talked to in ways that would make anyone quit. But I stopped reacting. Every time it happened I asked myself what this was teaching me. And one night, sitting alone after a long shift, I finally saw it clearly. None of this was random. All of it pointed in the same direction. A place where everything is ready at the right time, done the right way, where customers do not have to wait, where the experience does not depend on luck, a system where every step is controlled. And for the first time I understood I was not just surviving, I was learning how to build something that could work better than every place I had been. And once I saw that clearly, I knew I would not stay an employee forever. After moving through a series of unstable jobs, I finally found my way into a small diner-style restaurant with an open kitchen where the smell of grilled meat and hot oil filled the air from the moment you walked in. I asked for any position and was taken in at the lowest level, prepping ingredients, cleaning, staying at the end of the line. The head chef was strict and said very little, and the other cooks treated me like I did not belong. On my first day I was yelled at for cutting meat the wrong way, called slow before I even found my rhythm, and given the heaviest tasks while others watched. I did not react, I observed. I realized that being good here was not about cooking better. It was about keeping speed and consistency during peak hours. In the morning they prepared egg sandwiches with beef and chicken in small batches. By lunch they shifted to fried chicken and quick meals. And by evening everything focused on filling hot orders. Everything revolved around timing. I started paying attention to the ingredients more than the recipes. I noticed the difference in beef color, some cuts fresh, others already aging, chicken that was firm and clean, and some that felt off, eggs that held their shape and others that did not. I was not allowed to cook yet, but I learned how to read what I was handling. One day a shipment of chicken arrived, and I caught a faint smell that was not right. I told one of the cooks and he brushed it off, telling me not to act like I knew more than I did. The chicken was used anyway, and within hours customers began sending food back, saying something was wrong. No one said I was right, but I knew what I had seen. After that some of them became more hostile, saying I thought I was better. Some would make mistakes and shift the blame toward me. One busy night the kitchen was under pressure. One cook ruined a batch of beef and pushed it into my station for me to continue. I looked at it and knew it should not be used. If I stopped everything would slow down, but if I continued it would go to customers. I threw it out and started over. He slammed a tray onto the counter and accused me of slowing everyone down. The tension rose instantly, and that was when the head chef stepped in. He did not ask much. He picked up the meat, looked at it, and said throwing it out was the right call. That was the first time someone stood on my side. After the shift he asked me to stay. He did not praise me, he just said, "If you want to work in a kitchen you start with what no one wants to learn, the ingredients." From that day he began teaching me what no one else would: how to read beef by its grain and color to know how it was handled, how to feel chicken and know if it was still good, how to crack an egg and understand its freshness instantly, He taught me that no recipe can fix bad ingredients, and more importantly he taught me timing, how to prepare just enough before peak hours, never too much, never too little, every batch done at the right moment. He called it a system. I made mistakes and he corrected them, sometimes harshly, but for the first time I felt like someone was truly teaching me. The others still did not like me, they still talked behind my back and tried to slow me down, but I no longer cared. I focused on what I was learning. Over time I moved closer to the line, handling more important parts of the kitchen, and I began to understand that the food itself was not the center, the experience was what brought people back, and that experience depended on small things: the quality of ingredients, the timing of preparation, and the speed of service. One night after a late shift I stood in the quiet kitchen and realized I had learned enough, not everything, but the parts that mattered. I had not just learned how to cook, I had learned how to choose what was worth cooking, how to prepare before customers asked, and how to keep everything running in rhythm. And for the first time I knew that if I ever had a place of my own, I would not follow the old way, I would build a system that worked better. Half a year after I was trusted as a sous chef, I knew I had reached a point where staying meant comfort but leaving meant growth. One night after closing I told my mentor I wanted to leave and build something of my own. He did not answer right away. He kept wiping down the counter as if he had heard those words before. Then he finally spoke and told me about his own past. Years ago he had the same idea. He left a stable kitchen to open his own place. He had the skills, the confidence, and the belief that hard work alone would be enough, but he failed, not because he could not cook, but because he did not understand everything outside the kitchen. He trusted the wrong supplier, wasted money on inventory he could not sell, hired people who did not care the way he did, and most of all he did not build a system. He said he thought passion would carry him, but passion does not fix broken operations. He lost everything and had to come back to work for someone else. He looked at me and said, if you leave you have to accept that you might lose more than you think you can handle. He told me staying would be easier, I would have stability, a position, a future that was predictable. Leaving meant starting from nothing again. But this time with more at stake. He was not trying to stop me, he was making sure I understood the cost. I stood there thinking about everything I had been through, the farm, the jobs, the nights with nothing, the lessons that came with every failure, and I realized something clearly. I had already lived through losing everything once, and I had not come this far to stay where I was safe. I told him I understood, and that I was not leaving because I thought it would be easy, I was leaving because I knew I was ready. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, not with approval but with acceptance. The next morning I walked out of that kitchen for the last time, not with anger or frustration but with something far more dangerous: certainty. I did not have a big plan, I did not have a lot of money, but I had something stronger. I knew how to build something that could work, and this time whatever I created would belong to me. After leaving the restaurant I did not rush into opening a store. I spent time walking through different parts of the city, looking for places others had already given up on, not the ones that looked the best. Most landlords looked at me with doubt. They asked about my experience, my money, my plan, and when I answered I could tell they did not believe me. Some said it directly that I would not last. I did not argue because I did not need them to believe, I just needed a chance. Then I found it, a small storefront in an old strip of shops on the edge of a residential area. The glass dusty, the sign removed, the inside dark and silent like it had been forgotten for a long time. The landlords were a married couple. They greeted me politely but their eyes were sharp and calculating. The husband said the place had been empty for almost a year. A few people had tried before but none lasted. The wife added that this area was not easy for business. They did not say I could not do it, but the way they spoke made it clear most people would walk away. I stepped inside and looked at everything closely, not to judge how it looked but to see if it could work. I paid attention to the people passing by, workers, drivers, people heading home late, people who did not have time to wait. The demand was still there, it just had not been done right. When I came back out, I told them I wanted to rent it. They exchanged a quick look as if they did not expect that answer. The husband started talking about the price, higher than I expected, around $2,000 a month for a small place like this, not including utilities and other costs. I knew small retail spaces in the United States could range from about $1,500 to $3,000 depending on the area, but for a place in this condition it was not cheap. I did not react right away. I asked about the terms, the length of the lease, the deposit. The wife stepped in and said they only wanted serious tenants, that they did not want another failure. I understood what they were doing, making the opportunity sound more limited than it really was. I stayed quiet for a moment, then said I would agree to the price, but I needed a short-term lease, 6 months to start, because I was not willing to lock myself into something that had not proven itself yet. They hesitated, clearly preferring something longer. But in the end they agreed, likely because no one else was willing to take the space. We sat down at an old table inside the shop and signed the lease. For 6 months the paperwork was simple but every line was firm. When I put my name on it, I knew I had just taken on a risk most people would avoid. When I walked out, I did not feel confident or excited. I just knew one thing: they saw a place no one wanted, and I saw a place that could finally be run the right way. I opened on a Monday with a simple sign out front that said grand opening, 10% off all items for the first week, breakfast sandwiches priced at $5.49, chicken sandwiches at $7.49, and free coffee with any breakfast before 8. The first day about 30 people walked in: drivers, construction workers, a few office employees who did not have time to wait. By the end of the week the number grew to just over 300 customers. Not a crowd, but enough to show movement. I worked the line alone, preparing in small batches, keeping everything hot and ready without letting anything sit too long. Some orders were smooth, some were slow, but people started coming back, and that was what mattered. On the third day my mentor walked in without calling. He stood quietly near the counter watching how I moved. Not the food but the timing. After a few minutes he stepped closer and said, "You kept it simple." I nodded and said I had no room for mistakes. He ordered a sandwich and waited, watching every step. When I handed it to him he took a bite, paused, and said, "You are not cooking for them, you are timing for them." I said, "That is what you taught me." He looked around once more and asked, "Do you need anything?" I thought for a moment and said, "I need customers to come back." He gave a small nod and said, "Then do not give them a reason not to." Before leaving he added, "Do not grow too fast, make this work first." That night after closing I sat alone in the back and started running the numbers in my head. Average ticket around $6, just over $2,000 in revenue for the week. Then I broke it down piece by piece. Food costs close to 40%, rent $2,000 a month, which came out to about $500 a week, utilities, gas, supplies, everything added up quickly. I wrote it all down and calculated again. The result was clear: almost no profit, maybe a few hundred at best. Some days it felt like nothing at all. I looked at the numbers and told myself the truth: if the customer count stayed the same as this first week, this place would eventually lose money. I closed the notebook and made a decision. I was not here to make money in the first week. I was here to make it work, and if it worked I would find a way to grow it. By the second month, the store was no longer quiet in the mornings. The same faces came back, and new ones followed. The line started forming earlier, and for the first time I could not keep up alone without making people wait. I remembered what my mentor said: do not grow too fast, but also do not let the system break. So I made the decision to hire one person, just one, someone who could follow instructions and stay consistent. I trained him the same way I was trained, not with recipes first, but with ingredients and timing. I told him, do not try to be fast, try to be ready before they ask. With 2 people the line moved differently. Customers did not have to wait as long, and that changed everything. More people came back and word started spreading quietly. At the same time I added a simple option for ordering through an app, not something complicated, just enough so customers could place an order before they arrived or while they were on the way. It was not a big change, but it removed friction, and that alone increased volume. By the middle of the second month, daily customers were averaging around 80 to 100, some days higher during peak hours. The weekly traffic moved closer to 600 customers, and revenue followed, reaching around $4,000 to $5,000 a week depending on the days. The numbers looked better, but I did not let that change how I worked. Every night I still sat down and went through the same calculation: food cost, labor, rent, utilities. This time there was real profit, around $1,000 to $1,500 a week after expenses. Not enough to relax, but enough to prove something important: the system was working under pressure. One afternoon my new hire asked why we did not add more items since more customers were coming in. I looked at the line, then back at him and said, "More items will slow us down, and slow means we lose what brought them here." He nodded, and we kept the same menu, just executed better. The store was busier now, but I did not see it as success yet. I saw it as a test. If it could hold at this level, then I could think about what came next. By the 5th month, the store was finally stable in a way I had never imagined. Since the 3rd month I had added dinner service and hired one more person to keep the pace from breaking. Daily traffic kept rising, and weekly revenue was holding between $6,000 and $7,000. It was no longer survival, it was operation. Everything moved on rhythm, ingredients, timing, people. And that was exactly when something else began to change. The landlords started showing up more often. At first they stood outside, then they came in and sat in the corner with a drink, but they were not there to talk. They were watching, counting, following every order, every customer. I understood what they were doing, but I kept working. Near the end of the 5th month they came in with someone else, a man in a suit carrying a folder. I knew what it meant the moment I saw him. I invited them to sit and poured water like it was any other day. The landlord began calmly, saying there were 2 days left on the 6-month lease. I nodded. He continued that property values had gone up and it was time to discuss a new agreement, that if I wanted to stay we needed to adjust the rent. I asked how much. He glanced at the agent, who opened his folder and said based on the current location and traffic the new rent would be $6,000 a month. For a second I said nothing, but in my head it was clear. A place that had been empty for nearly a year suddenly worth 3 times more just because it was finally working. The landlord leaned forward slightly and added that there had been other people asking about the space but he had not accepted. Because I was already there. I looked at both of them and said one word, rent it. The agent nodded immediately, the landlord smiled. I followed with another question, should we sign now or next month when I make the payment? He waved it off and said we could sign next month together. They left not long after, satisfied. The door closed and my employees came over, upset, saying it was unfair, that they saw us doing well and raised the price. I looked at the door and said quietly, they will learn. I remembered how his wife had been sitting there days before, not talking, just watching, counting every customer, every sale. They thought it was easy. I took out my phone and called a number I had saved, a regular customer who worked in real estate. David answered on the second ring. I asked if the place he mentioned before was still available. He said yes. I asked for the location and told him I was on my way. 8 minutes later I was there. It was larger, brighter, and the price was clear. $1,200 a month because the owner needed to rent it quickly and had been waiting for months. I did not hesitate. I told him to call the owner. I signed a 5-year lease that same day. Everything moved fast after that. I went back and called a moving crew, told them everything had to be moved that night and I would pay double. My 2 employees stayed and worked with me. We packed, carried, rebuilt, and by nearly 4 in the morning the new place was almost ready. The next morning, at 9, just as I expected, the old landlord arrived. The front was closed, no lights, no sound. He pushed the door open and rushed inside. The place was empty, completely stripped, no equipment, no tables, nothing. He stood there for a second, then turned and ran back outside, pulling out his phone, dialing again and again. No answer. He tried a different number, nothing. His voice rose as he shouted my name into the empty street. Anger turning into panic, he paced back and forth, hitting redial, but there was no connection, no response, nothing left for him to control anymore. The night I moved, there was no celebration, only the sound of equipment dragging across concrete and the weight of time pressing on every step. I left nothing behind, no sign, no note, only the system that had finally begun to work. By the time the sky began to lighten, the new place was ready, not perfect but right. The first thing I did was not turn on the grill. It was updating the address on the app, keeping the same name, the same menu, the same timing. I wanted to see what would happen when everything around it changed, but the system stayed the same. The first minutes were silent enough to hear the refrigerator hum, then the phone buzzed, one order, then another, then a stream. One employee looked at me and asked if they already knew we moved. I shook my head and said they do not need to know where we are. They only need to know they will get what they expect. I kept the rhythm unchanged, small batch prep, nothing sitting too long, nothing slowing the line. That first day passed without noise but with enough proof that the system held. By the end of the week, orders were growing steadily, most of them coming through the app. I adjusted the layout, moved tables and stations to remove wasted motion, rewrote prep schedules so anyone could step in and keep the pace. The first month I still worked the line, fixing small mistakes, removing anything that slowed us down. By the second month, traffic grew faster than expected. Mornings were full, lunch had no gaps. I hired one more person, but I did not teach recipes first. I taught how to read ingredients and prepare before customers asked. When someone suggested adding more items, I said adding at the wrong time costs everything. We tested a few quick items for lunch and dinner, but only kept what did not break the flow. By the end of the second month, dinner service stabilized, limited menu, controlled speed. In the third month, revenue surged, app orders carried most of the volume while in-store traffic stayed consistent. I stepped away from the grill, standing back, watching, cutting what slowed us down and keeping only what worked. I brought in a shift manager who could hold the rhythm without me. The night I saw the store run smoothly without my presence, I knew the next step was not expansion of the menu, but repetition of the system. I opened the map, not to find a better location but to find the same problem in a different place. The second location opened quietly, no grand opening, just a small discount and an update on the app. The early days followed the same pattern, slow, then steady, then growing. I repeated everything that worked, layout, prep, timing, training. I did not hire the most experienced people. I hired those who could follow the system. The third location came faster than the Second, the fourth proved something new: each place could run without me. I moved between them not as a worker but as someone watching the flow, correcting anything that drifted. By the fifth location, I stopped one evening and looked at what had been repeated successfully, and for the first time I gave it a name: Monroe Market. From that moment on, everything had to match: ingredient quality, preparation, speed, consistency. I turned what had lived in my head into a system anyone could learn. The delivery app became part of the foundation. Customers did not need to know where we were. They only needed to know what they would receive. From one neighborhood we moved into the next, then into another city, and then across state lines. Each new location was not something new, it was a controlled copy of something already proven. Within 1 year, Monroe Market was no longer a single store or a small group. It became a growing chain known for being reliable, for delivering the same experience every time. We did not build the brand with advertising, we built it by not allowing a single order to disappoint. When people asked what came next, I did not give long answers. I said in 5 years it would be across the country, and in 10 years it would move beyond it. To some, that sounded too ambitious, but to those who had seen how a forgotten space became a system that could run anywhere, they understood it was not ambition. It was a direction that had already begun long before the name Tige Monroe became something people would remember. While Tige Monroe was focused on expanding her business, somewhere else the farm that once held everything for her family was slowly becoming a burden they could no longer carry. In the years after Tige left, they believed doing what they had seen was enough. They sold the last cattle and chickens that Tige had raised to get capital, then expanded faster than they ever had before. More than 500 laying hens, 300 broiler chickens, and 15 young calves were brought in at once. They thought feeding them well and keeping the barns clean would be enough. They never understood what had made things work before. When the chickens were small, the space held, but once they grew past a kilogram, the density became too much. The air turned heavy, the birds fluffed up, weakened, and began dying in large numbers before they could even lay eggs. Without proper sanitation and without building their resistance, everything collapsed faster than expected. The cattle were no better. They believed grass and feed were enough, but their digestive systems became infected. Most of them grew thin. Only a few developed well, while the rest failed to meet standards. The first year ended in loss. The second year they tried again with more experience, but egg production was low and the quality was poor, forcing them to sell at lower prices. Money did not come in, but expenses kept rising. At the same time, the older brother, once seen as the family's hope, became another crack in the foundation. He believed promises of a high-level job and paid over $30,000 for an opportunity that never existed, losing everything. After that he moved from one job to another, but could not keep any of them for more than a few months. The older sister, with a degree the family had once been proud of, fell into a relationship that was never equal from the start. The man she trusted spoke of connections, positions, and opportunities, promising to bring her into a high-paying role. He dressed well, spoke smoothly, and always appeared when she needed reassurance. But nothing ever came from his promises. Instead he began talking about the farm, about its future, about plans that required his name to be part of it. He knew something the family did not: the land was within a future development plan and the compensation could reach $2 million. To him it was not a home, it was an opportunity. The conversations between him and the sister slowly shifted from building a future together to sharing ownership. She did not realize she was being led, because she still believed he was her way out. As for Tige's parents, after 5 years they were finally forced to face what they had avoided. Failure had not come all at once, but through a series of small decisions, trusting the wrong people and not understanding what they were doing. The debt did not come only from the farm, but from the empty promises they had believed in. The number climbed toward more than $500,000. Each day added more pressure. Arguments became constant. No one spoke about the future anymore. They were only trying to hold on to what was left. And for the first time in years, in the heavy silence of the house, the name Tige Monroe was spoken not with comparison or blame, but like a question no one dared to answer. If they had not let her leave that day, would everything have been different? The car slowed as we moved deeper into the rural road, my manager beside me explaining the plan to acquire 5 farms for a closed supply system. But I was no longer listening. Something outside the window pulled my attention, something I recognized before I could admit it. I told him to stop, stepped out, and chose to walk the rest of the way, each step heavier than the last, until the old gate came into view, the barn, the broken fence. It was the place I had left behind. Before I could process it, a government vehicle arrived. Officials stepped out and announced the land was part of a development plan. Compensation could reach $2 million. The reaction was immediate. My family erupted in excitement, shouting, laughing, grabbing onto each other like everything had been saved in a single moment. And then someone saw me, standing there, still and silent, and the noise shifted instantly. My sister stepped forward first, her face twisting with bitterness. So now you come. Crawling back, the second money shows up. You suddenly remember this place. You could not handle the work, but now you think you deserve a cut. You are not even worth standing on this land. My brother let out a cold mocking laugh and piled on. You were always the useless one, could not take pressure, ran off like a coward, and now you show up thinking you can take what we built. You do not get a single dollar. My father stepped closer, his voice low but cutting. I told you the day you walked out, if you leave this house you are nothing to this family, and now you come back standing here like you belong. You should be ashamed. Even showing your face. My mother shook her head in disgust, her voice sharp and unforgiving. I warned you never to come back, and here you are chasing money like you have any right to it. You lost that the moment you left. Do not act like blood means anything now. Then her boyfriend stepped forward, a smug smile on his face as he looked me up and down. So you heard about the payout and came running, trying to act like you are part of something big. You do not even understand what is going on. Here, people like you do not belong in deals like this. If you think you are getting anything, you are more pathetic than I thought. My manager stepped in, trying to calm the situation, saying they misunderstood, that I was not here for any share. But they turned on him instantly, voices rising, mocking, dismissing him like he did not matter. Who the hell are you to talk? One of them shoved him back. Another voice sneered, if she owns anything here then I must be running the whole project. Before he could respond, a sharp slap cut him off, then another, not just anger but pure contempt. He staggered back, shaken, trying to pull me away, telling me we should leave. This was not worth it, but I did not move. I stood there, letting every word hit without reacting, and in the middle of that storm something became clear. I reached into my bag, pulled out the acquisition map he had shown me earlier, unfolded it slowly, my eyes scanning until they stopped at the address. This exact piece of land. I looked up again at them, still shouting, still convinced I had come to beg, and for the first time since I arrived I understood exactly why I was standing there. The air was still thick with tension after the insults when another sound tore through the silence. Engines screeching to a stop, not just one car but a convoy of more than 10 vehicles lining up outside the farm. Doors opened in unison, men in suits stepping out first, followed by security and senior executives. The man at the front rushed forward, and the moment he saw Tige, he bowed deeply, his voice urgent. We're late. Our apologies, Ms. Tige. Her family hadn't even processed what was happening when Tige spoke, her voice cold and controlled. If this situation isn't handled immediately, we will terminate the contract and move to another partner. The man turned instantly, his expression sharpening, pointing straight at the sister's boyfriend. 2 guards moved in without hesitation, restraining him and forcing him to his knees. The executive's voice dropped, heavy and suffocating. You dared to use my name to scam people, and you even dared to lay hands on Ms. Tige's staff? A slap cracked across his face, then another. The man staggered, disoriented, collapsing to the ground as his voice trembled. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Please, Ms. Tige. Have mercy on me. Tige stepped closer, looking down at him without a flicker of emotion. When you slapped my manager, did you think about showing him mercy? He froze, tears spilling down his face, unable to answer. The executive turned back to her, lowering his head again. Is this acceptable? Not yet. Her voice cut through the air like ice. I want him terminated immediately. And before we arrived, we already gathered evidence that he used your company's name to defraud multiple people. The man nodded without hesitation. Our legal team will take over. He will be prosecuted. The man collapsed completely, sobbing and begging, but the guards dragged him away like he was nothing. The sound of footsteps faded, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Tige turned slightly, her voice calm but absolute. Remove this farm from the project. That single sentence shattered everything. Her family broke. They rushed toward her, no pride, no distance left. Trembling hands grabbed at her arms, her clothes, even her legs, clinging like it was their last chance. My child, please. Tige, don't do this. We're family. Their voices overlapped, desperate, broken. Tige stood still for a moment, then sharply pulled her hand away. 2 guards stepped forward instantly, blocking them, forcing them back. All 4 collapsed to the ground, tears pouring uncontrollably. Her mother dropped to her knees, crawling forward, voice choking. I knew you would succeed. I knew it. Please, save this family. Her sister stammered through tears. You've always been the best. I just didn't realize, please. Her brother rushed in, shaking. You didn't come back for money, we're family. Her father stood frozen for a few seconds, then fell to his knees, tears streaming down a face aged far beyond its years. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. You came back to help us, and I couldn't even see it. Tige looked at them, her eyes so cold that every word felt like a blade. 5 years ago, when I asked for my share, what did you do? You insulted me. And the rest of you stood there watching. When I walked out that door, did anyone come after me? Did anyone stop me? Was I still family to you then? No one answered. For 5 years, she continued, her voice lower but heavier. Did any of you ever call me even once? Only the sound of sobbing remained. You lived off my labor. Her gaze swept across each of them. Did you ever treat me like blood? Her mother crawled forward again, clutching her leg, crying uncontrollably. We were wrong. Please forgive us. Don't remove the farm. Tige looked down at her, her voice tightening. Now you realize it? When you threw me out, did you think about this day? You gave birth to me, but you never loved me. Not even once. She pointed toward the others. Ask them to help you. The children you were so proud of. Her father collapsed completely now, his voice breaking. Punish me if you want. I'll take everything, just please, save this family. And suddenly a memory hit. A little girl standing at the door with a torn school bag, asking quietly for a new one. Then fix it yourself if it's torn. Her hands tightened. Her voice dropped, colder than ever. You threw me out like I was nothing, and now you're asking me to save you? The man lowered his head, crying. If you don't help, the farm will be taken. We'll lose everything, please. Let me take the blame, just me. For a brief moment, she paused. For the first time in years, she did not see the man who had cast her out, but a man who had been crushed, trying to hold what little remained of his family together. She turned away. No more words. One step, then another. She didn't slow down. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Behind her, the crying broke into chaos. Don't leave. Tige, please. We'll lose everything. But she kept walking. Past the old gate. The same gate she once walked out of with nothing. No one stopped her this time. Only the sound of people collapsing behind her. Begging, breaking, losing the last piece of hope they had left. Everyone believed she was gone. That this time she would leave them just like they once left her. She took a few more steps. Then stopped. She didn't turn around immediately. She just stood there, for a long moment. The wind passed, carrying their cries, and the memories she thought she had buried. Her hand tightened, then slowly released. Once. Then she turned. Her eyes steady. She walked back toward them. Fine, her voice was clear, firm, unshakable. I'll give you one chance. They all looked up, desperate. I will buy this farm. A pause. But under one condition.